Well, hello everyone, and thanks for joining us for episode 7 of AR Chat. Today we are lucky enough to be joined with Beth Torrie. Beth, it's so great to have you with my fellow co-hosts, Stephen Dickens and Nathan Herman. And I can't believe it's episode 7.
I know, right? That's flown by, hasn't it? It's just gone so quick.
It really has. Beth, I would love for you to just remind, I know everyone knows you. Remind everyone who you are.
I'm sure that's not true, but hello. Thank you for having me. I'm Beth Torrie. I'm the founder of Torrie Communications and the founder of the Analyst Relations Learning Curve, which is an online curriculum to help teach the basics of analyst relations for now. And we're developing tons more new great content. I've been in software for over 25 years. I started specializing in analyst relations in around 2001. And I absolutely love working with analysts, working with this community. It's incredibly supportive. And yeah, looking forward to being here today and chatting
So
with you.
I'm going to steal Crystal's question that she normally asks us. She's still the host, so we're just bouncing around. So one of the questions we're asking all the guests that come on the show, Beth, is with this industry is a small industry. There's not many of us that do it. There's not many of us in the community, and we're trying to kind of find the origin story, if you will. I saw the new Marvel movie this past weekend, and I'm fascinated by origin stories of these characters. So the question we're asking is, where do you think this all started? Where do you think analyst relations kind of started? The consensus opinion, so you can build on it, is we think it was one of the OG kind of Silicon Valley firms, maybe an IBM, a Cisco, a HP back in the day in the 60s and 70s. But what do you think?
You guys shared the question with me, and I don't go back that far. It definitely started from a Gartner RFP, So all good things end up leading to Gartner. I was thinking that Bill Hopkins was the first person, I believe, to identify analyst relations as a skill.
Okay, that's
That
a great
needed
place
to
to start.
be, he
Mic
needed,
drop for Bill because I had a
yeah.
conversation with him and he was quoting I think I wrote down a date like 1987 or something. I will not tell you how old I was at that time.
He
But
wrote he wrote a book. It's somewhere on the
influencing the
shelf.
influencers. How ironic.
I have it, I'm quoted in it, but I think he was the first person to kind of make it a real skill, a repeatable skill. I took his class, it was great. Um, the When I really figured out there was a community, it was probably already 2005, and so way past inception point. But I think at that point there were maybe 50 of us in the room, and that was a Forrester AR Council meeting, and the AR Council had already been started at that point. So I was late to that game. I spoke at my first meeting, and I was at a startup, and I spoke after Jocelyn Eisenberg, who I have crowned her the godmother of analyst relations.
That's
She
fair.
is amazing. She is a force of nature. She had a fantastic career. I think she is retired now.
She retired,
Um,
I think, 2 years ago. Um, yeah, and which was wild because it was like right after COVID, so we didn't get to see her again.
uh, I mean, she's amazing. I had to speak after her, and I am a startup woman, right? Like, I love grit, I love asking questions. I'm an investigative journalist. Like, I will ask everybody in the room 400 questions until I can find the answer. But I remember at that meeting, I was on the stage and I said, have you guys really figured out this whole customer reference thing? And everybody was like up in arms. And that started like a 3-day discussion about customer references. And that's how I met Wendy Schlensky, who I did the Bendy podcast with, because she was like, Do you have this? I was using like a customer reference worksheet. And I was like, she was like, would you mind sharing that? And I was like, of course. And then I said to Eric Lobel, who was running the council at that time, I was like, we should have some kind of digital store where we could put all of our documents, not realizing that we were literally giving all our IP to the AR council at that time. But that's probably another question. But that was like how we were doing it. We were asking questions and like figuring it out as a community. No one had like an answer on like, this is the best practice in running or how to do customer references for an RFI. Do you remember any of this? Were you there?
I wasn't there. I didn't get in the world of AR until 2011.
Okay.
But you just blew me away because customer reference thing, like what? That's such a core part
I
of
know.
the workflow and
Now 20 years later, but
yeah.
then it was like you were calling your reps and like, hey, I read about you on this press release, can you hook me up and do a reference? And everyone's like, no, it's against company policy.
The other thing that's really heartwarming is there's always been this thread of community collaboration,
Absolutely.
and let's take this thing that we don't even know what we're doing right now because it's not defined and it's so new, right?
And constantly changing, right?
Well,
Make
Nathan,
it
let's maybe bring you in on that a little
yeah.
bit. I mean, what are you, 5, 6 years into being an AR pro now? Am I remembering right? Is that about the time frame?
Me, 4.5 going on 5.
4.5. I
Yeah.
mean, are you still seeing this evolution and this trend that so much of this is still new and not written down and not crystallized?
Yeah, I mean, so many parts of this job are ever evolving and not crystallized. I mean, I think I'm fortuitous in the sense that a lot of really smart and experienced people have codified a lot of best practices, whether
Mm-hmm.
someone like Beth or someone like AR Insights or Spotlight or KCG. But at the same time, we've talked about this on the show. AR is at an evolutionary point. You could say the analyst landscape is at an evolutionary point, both from how analysts cover technology, how analyst firms go about monetizing their research, all the way to how analyst relations teams kind of seize the future, whether that be in a strategy-oriented direction and a sales enablement focused direction, a PR focused direction. I mean, or a combination of everything. So the community plays a big role in that as well, because I think we're figuring it out together. We're learning from people who are running world-class programs like over at Wiz or Palo Alto Networks. So we're figuring it out together, but I think we're at a point where, we can lean on the best practices, but we also have to create new ones.
It does feel like we're at that kind of inflection point. I'm having that conversation a lot I literally had it this week with one of the AR leaders around kind of metrics and KPIs of how to manage an independent.
Yeah.
How do you quantify and put value on advisory from an independent? There isn't a framework, there isn't a metric, there isn't a KPI. That's baked into what you do with Gartner and IDC, and there's why you would go to a Gartner analyst who's also working with thousands of clients. But how do you get advisory from somebody who's only maybe talking to a handful of clients? What are the case? It's not a client reach metric, but there's value to their analysis of the market. There's
That
the whole
requires
market's changing. It really is.
It requires an entirely different type of relationship. All analyst
Mm-hmm.
relationships are and should be two-way relationships.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at how you interact with an analyst at Gartner versus an analyst like yourself who's an independent, it's a different type of engagement. Dare I say a little bit more intimate? Like your Gartner analyst, you want to have a close relationship with, and you absolutely should. But your independents and your boutiques, they position themselves more as strategic advisors to the business. And so I do think that is a massive evolution that people are still figuring out how to work with.
And bringing it back to you, Beth, you have literally watched this. It was like GIF, or GGGGG, right? For years and years and years. So how do you, as someone that has watched this evolution, how do you navigate all of that?
I mean, I'm a numbers woman, right? Like I believe in the balance sheet. I think that when you work with at a board level, you can't hide behind a lot of the words that most analyst relations people use. And you got to get really comfortable with being strategic and data centric. And a lot of AR people kind of lack those skills. You know, they just want to count and analyst interactions or briefings, or the board doesn't care how many briefings you did.
No.
What does the board care about? They care about how much revenue you grew by, how much cost did you reduce? Yeah. Only two areas to impact a company. And you have to get comfortable with that. And I think everybody wants to hide in the shadows because marketing and comms has kind of hid in the shadows, right? And so if you could just kind of like be a cost center, that's great. But I genuinely believe and have experienced this on so many levels, 5 exits. What we do drives growth and revenue when it's done well. And like Nathan said, bi-directionally, back and forth, constant iterations, agile.
I would also just stress, I think that growth can be product growth as well, not necessarily.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting.
It should lead to revenue growth though, right? Like,
better
product growth doesn't really like, you know, but you know, a good roadmap should lead to revenue.
It's interesting. I'm doing a piece of advisory with a vendor at the moment around their software strategy. And I always try and start with pulling apart a bunch of, it's almost marketing debt in the same way there's technical debt in an infrastructure. So I always try and start with the simplistics. And I've overly simplified why B2B buyers buy, and it riffs off your point, Beth. B2B buyers buy for 3 reasons: make money, save money, not get fired.
Yeah.
Yep.
Our entire tech marketing value prop boils down to those 3 things. I've had people try and do sort of conversational gymnastics to say that it doesn't fit into one of those buckets. But I have yet to find somebody be successful to find something that doesn't fit into one of those. So when you're trying to sort of have these conversations, how are you making money for the company? How are you saving money for the company? And also, how are you ensuring that the C-suite doesn't get fired? You know, that can be not getting on the front page of the Wall Street Journal because your company's had an outage or you had a data breach, or, you know, so there is that dynamic as well. But it's fascinating to hear you frame analyst relations through that same lens that I sort of position it, because I agree. That's what the C-suite cares about.
And I do think that I come from a comms background, right? Which doesn't always connect to the balance sheet, right? Like we can talk about brand, we can talk about protecting the company, but it's very hard to put comms into the balance sheet appropriately. And I think a lot of us in this space come from a comms background. And this is where you have to evolve, right? That companies are changing and everyone now has to be more strategic, and you have to understand how what your job is, how it impacts the business. And even if it's, you know, in a very unique little way, it's like you have to be able to work with your team to communicate the business value that you're doing. As soon as that stops, and I think this was the big fear. I remember talking with Brooke Kutsonis at the AR Council during COVID. I was going for a walk around the lake, and she was like, you know, it was the beginning of COVID, and we were like, what do you think? And I was like, I think as long as we just keep our eye on value, we'll do well, I said, but if anybody drops their focus, it's going to be a hard time, because when you can't be in person and you can't like have a team meeting, right? Like it's even harder when you're purely digital to connect and to really make your case. But I like that word value is just all over everything I do these days.
Beth, I think
it's important.
Value is important. So I think it would be great, because part of the purpose of this podcast is, I think, educational. So as much as you're willing to expand, what are some of the metrics that can allow an analyst relations program to track value? Because that's hard. That's hard, especially because
so hard.
Say in most companies, analyst relations sits within marketing or comms, occasionally product marketing. So within the product business line, and maybe strategy. So are you looking at asset downloads and how those filter into a market qualified lead? How are you looking at pipeline attribution? I mean, these are massively important questions that do not have easy answers.
There's definitively no easy answer. I'm a consultant, right? So I work with every client based on what their business goals are. Is their goal to be seen as the most innovative software platform for about are we going to get to see him? Sorry.
Is the special guest going to join us, Crystal?
One of my favorites.
I have a special guest that has to say goodbye to mom before he goes to daycare. So
bring him into the show. We always love the special guest joining us, Crystal. This is the cutest part of our show, everybody.
This is the
Crystal
Mother's
feels
Day
terrible,
episode.
but it's the cutest part of our show.
I was trying to be subtle and I clearly failed at
We embrace motherhood and parenthood.
Oh, hello.
Say hi, AR chat crew.
How are you? You got so big. Oh my goodness. Crystal, he's gorgeous.
Thank you. All right, sweetheart.
Did you make your mommy a craft for Mother's Day?
Make me some hand flowers or something.
A nice coloring.
Go to dad. We see you later.
This is a community show, Crystal. We love having special guests.
Especially when they're sort of pint-sized, right?
This is the next generation of analyst relations coming through on the show.
Yes. All right, you have to go. We only have 30 minutes.
All right, so we were talking about value. So I will tell you, we had Crystal's company, AR Insights, held a in-person meeting in Boston. Was it November 2024? Great. And we had a whole session on value. And one of the speakers, actually may not have been a speaker, I think it was an attendee, had said, the best thing you could do is make friends with someone in sales. And I was like, yep. Because you know who always knows what's going on for bi-directional communication? Sales. Right? They know what's working, what's not working. They know who's buying, who's not buying. They know win-loss data. You know who's really interested in win-loss data? Analysts. So I work with sales a lot. Now, at a large scale company, this is a brutal process. Mm-hmm. But anecdotes, right? If you are helping close an 8-figure deal, you want to claim your fame on that, right? It's a team sale, but if your material, your concepts, your engagement is supporting an 8-figure deal, the investors are talking about that on their calls. Of course, that's important. So it's also like awareness of what's important to the company. Is it those 8-figure deals? Is it the number of deals closed, right? For every company, they have different metrics that are important. And you have to be able to align your program to your company's business goals. Like I couldn't create something for AR Insights about how analysts are impacting their work because I don't know what their corporate goals are. You have to really know how the company, what's their exit strategy for real, not like an imaginary one, a real exit strategy. Is it growth? Is it cost reduction? And then how you align to that. And the MBO, not MBO, what is the OKR structure really helped me understand like aligning goals with activities. And I like that concept really brought that home for me.
So I have to name drop really quick. I'm so sorry that this managing to the P&L, structuring your why for your department, your team. I mean, this is across not just AR, right? It's any team
Absolutely.
that wants to be viewed as an asset, or some part of the growth mechanism has to be aligned to the P&L. And it's just I don't know if it's because of where I am in my career, but it's a conversation that I'm having. And I went to this amazing workshop by this VC called Primary. And it was all about that education piece. I highly recommend everyone, if they can find something on YouTube, find the resources, because it was one of the most eye-opening things, in thinking about how do you secure your seat and become valuable? And it really is a different mindset. I love that you talk about the history of coming up through comms and marketing and how that's not always obvious and why that's something that we struggle with today. Well, there we go.
This is a book that George Colony recommended to me. George Colony is the CEO of Forrester. Aligning Strategy and Sales. Fantastic.
We'll put that in the show notes, everybody, so
Yeah,
you don't
it's
lose
good. It is a good read, but like this is how we have to think as AR people. And this is where I think like the real difference between there's like AR practitioners and there's AR strategists. And you can do inquiries and briefings and not do them strategically. But if you do all of your work strategically, it makes you a different kind of executive.
So, Beth, I've got a question, and I'm going to go to you and Nathan for this because I'm really interested in your perspective. We'll go to you first, Beth. That makes sense for sort of, I suppose, some of the more tangible pieces. How many people, how many people have downloaded the MQ report? How many people have read the research? Was the research in the deal flow to close the deal? That stuff makes sense to me. The one I'm literally this week kind of trying to quantify with a vendor. I've got a conversation later on today about it. How do you quantify advisory? So I understand the written asset. I understand the thing that gets downloaded. Nathan, you hit a couple of metrics, but I'm doing a number of advisory projects at the moment, and it will be behind closed doors. There'll be no external facing. And the only metric, somebody asked me, like, well, how do you put a metric on that? And it's like, well, they're a repeat buyer. They come by and buy it again the next year. So I'd really love to understand kind of that.
I'm going to give you so it really depends, like, what's the advisory about, right? Like, but so if the advisory is about, typically in our world, it's about product, right?
Message testing,
maybe
go to
you
market.
got 3 product recommendations. Maybe you got 1 validated. We validated a product decision. That reduces time to market for your product. Maybe we got, we eliminated a feature we were going to build that you reduce time to market for the product. Sometimes I use advisory for partners, right? Like, who are the best partners should we go after? You could spend 2 years building your partner program. You've just lost time to market. You got to get them. You got to get your partners, your short list, your long list signed, sealed, delivered, get them on the marketplace, right? Like, that is the expectation that software and SaaS now has. In the old days, like what was the, I don't remember the name of that company, but like, yeah, even like IBM, it would take 2 years to close a partnership deal. Like, and it was like paper, it didn't mean anything. Now it's like the expectation is you have the partner on the marketplace and you can see how many downloads are from it, right?
Well, I'm thinking, Beth, more on the message testing. A lot of the work
so marketing, right?
So there's going to be a value prop.
Yep.
I intercept a lot of value props that are a sort of a 6 or a 7 out of 10.
Yeah.
And my engagement with the vendors is to turn them into a 9 out of 10. But if I wasn't involved, that 7 out of 10 would go into the market. And it might take 2 years for that to manifest itself in a reduction in sales or a product not being as successful as was envisaged. And if I come in and do a 6-8 week sprint and it becomes a 9 out of 10, how much credit can I take for it being a 6? That's the bit that I'm struggling to quantify in my mind. Maybe that there
No,
isn't a quantification for
it's
that.
a great question. And I'm like glad you're asking this to yourself. First, I'm also going to say invest in your value proposition because they're so bad 90% of the time.
I've yet to be engaged in one that
Throw it
I've
into
come in and gone,
ChatGPT and ask that how good your value proposition is because it's like not good at all.
yeah.
And I
You know-
actually have a book on value propositions, and I'll send you guys the link on it that I just
You
did.
need
Nathan,
to
I
have
mean,
Beth's reading club list.
Yeah, this is the AR reading club. I mean, Nathan, how
I'm
would you?
not about books, but like writing a value proposition, it should take a long time, right? Like it should be thoughtful, and when it's done right, like one of my clients it was so good, and I had nothing to do with it. I claim no fame here, but it was written about in the Wave. Like it was the headline, like their volume, it was crisp, it was short, it was perfect, and it was visionary. And I was like, this is amazing. The first time I read it, I was like, this is fantastic, you know. But so maybe is it quoted in materials? Does it help guide the company? Like a value proposition is the guiding light. And so maybe it's the value proposition that we helped our client create is recognized by the entire company as the clear goal that we all need to be working towards.
Yeah.
And it's just
Nathan, how would you quantify that where you are?
Well,
so that was I don't know about that. Nathan, what do you think?
Well, yeah, I just wanted to hit pause for a second and maybe pull out something I think, Stephen, you're asking about, which I think is really relevant for analysts who listen to this, because I know there are a few analyst relations practitioners. If anyone has suggestions, specifically on how
hit us up in the comments below.
like
This is
I
where
would
we get
love
to
to
sound
hear,
like a YouTuber.
I would love to hear how analysts are quantifying their value. So we talk a lot about how does analyst relations quantify its value to the business. I think you're highlighting that's an important question for you, Stephen, as well. So I would love to hear what some of those examples are. So yeah, if anyone has them, please drop them.
I haven't found a way to sell that piece of work without it being, well, I'm doing it for 4 or 5 other people and they keep coming back.
Well, I think you're also hitting on something important because, you know, when you go talk to an analyst firm, a new analyst firm, a boutique analyst firm, or a large analyst firm, when you get the pitch deck, it's often going to talk about reach, like the value is reach. But you are hitting on something very important. That is, reach is not the only values analysts bring to a business. So how can you convey that to a prospective client? As an analyst relations practitioner, I'm super passionate about that because I want to then be able to say, this is how this analyst thinks about his value as it relates to what they can bring to the business.
Oh, I'm jumping out of my skin. I just want to say this is the fundamental issue in our world. I've been thinking a lot about how does the analyst talk about their value prop? And it's this cyclical relationship, right? Where I think the AR person also has the onus of saying, hey, Stephen, you know what was really important that you said to me? This line was magic. And therefore, we made these downstream decisions and we were able to identify back to the P&L sheet that decision made a difference, right? And I think that it's really hard to implement because we're all in this roller coaster of like to-dos. Like my list is 50 things long today on top of the 50 from yesterday, right? But I think that part, if we can get in a good hygiene of saying, Stephen, you killed it with this, more of that, right? And then you can say, well, great. That's great feedback in terms of like what I'm offering. And that's a great story for you, right? The more that we can help you have great stories.
But the challenge I have, Kristen,
I have one suggestion that I came up with just while you're talking. Let me just throw it out there.
Yeah.
What if before you did the session with them, start with a report card that almost looks like the bottom of a wave analysis? Like, what do you think your company's market understanding is? What do you think your company's vision is in the marketplace relevant to your competition? Like, give them 5 questions, a sliding scale of 1 to 5, right? Finish that. Finish up your whole work give them the same exact report card. Now grade yourself.
After an advisory
And then a year later, ask the analyst that's covering them, do you think this work made an impact on it? Because you can do an inquiry, or have the client do an inquiry on that. Like, do you believe we have a tighter value proposition in the last year than we've ever had before since you've known us?
Beth, that's fantastic.
It's a great framework for both sides, right? It's a reflection point.
And this is something AR can facilitate. Just to
absolutely
double click on that. The question was about an advisory, because we spent, about 10 minutes talking about this. So how can you track value for an advisory? Analyst relations can do, basically like a pre-lesson entry ticket, like I would have done when I was a teacher. How well do you understand your value prop, or whatever kind of squishy metric you want to assess on a scale of 1 to 5? Give that after the advisory, so have 2 data kind of points, and then do it again 6 months or a year later, and bring the analyst perspective into it. Now you have a few different data points.
I think you just repeated what I said, but yes.
No, I did repeat what you said. I wanted to pull that out into like very explicit instructions.
Yeah.
Totally your idea.
You get the credit.
My own. Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Beth's idea, everyone.
Yeah. There's a word for that.
One of the things I want to do on the show is make sure we pull out the gems.
Yeah, absolutely.
Make them very clear. And I also wanted to say one other thing, because I know we're getting a little bit close on time. To anyone listening at whatever stage company you are as an analyst relations pro, this all goes back to knowing your business and your business's objectives. And every analyst relations program looks different at whatever stage of maturity you're at. An immature program, and that's not to say a bad program, an immature program that is just surviving day to day and doing the bare minimum, it is hard to implement a lot of these ideas, and you don't have to implement all of these ideas. These are
prioritization, Nathan, is so hard, especially for someone that's new, especially for someone that is new to an organization or new to their role. But the days of us not knowing stuff are over, because we have AI now. Ask questions. Read. I don't mean read lightly. Read your annual report. Read anything you can get your hands on.
Create a podcast.
Don't want to do the work, and that bothers me.
So I got to drop this, because reading is tough for me, because as you saw, a mom, I have a to-do list at home and at work. So Google LM, another little plug here, you can load up a bunch of documents and create a podcast for yourself, walk your dog, and do some passive learning if that's all you got. Because
you need to tell me about that.
Yeah.
Offline, you need to tell me about that.
There's an app that can turn your PDFs into a podcast.
A notebook.
If you like that format, which I really do, right? If it's like this 12-page document on legal stuff that I just need to get my arms around, turn it into a podcast, make it kind of funky for me.
And then you can take the walk so that you're not a sedentary human. Learn, and then you can come back and then dive into the pieces that are I really need to tap in.
Well, just really quickly, and technology is great, and there's tons of tools that are helping make this easier. But Beth, you said something earlier that I think is so important. AR should be investigative journalists.
Yep.
Ask questions. That is a fundamental skill you can institute today.
And do you know why, Nathan? Because analysts are investigative journalists.
Intellectually curious is how I define this job. They're going to nail
you for it. You better be prepared. I mean, if you've ever worked with Jennifer Polk at Gartner, one of the smartest minds ever, she would go through 5 questions and then lob in the hardest hitting question so softly. How did that impact your revenue? It was dang, girl. And the CEO blown away. But these folks are hard. They know how to ask questions, and they know exactly what questions to ask. So be prepared. That's our job.
We know where your bodies are buried as analysts. That's a phrase I use. I cover IBM a lot. I've been out with those guys this week, and you could tell when the mic was being passed around that they're passing it to me, and it's
That's a good sign.
We know exactly where the body, that Stephen knows where our bodies are buried. Well, I mean, And that's how a good analyst is intellectually curious and their domain expertise. If they're not asking the hardest questions of the C-suite that they get asked all week at these events, then the analysts aren't. And I often sit there in these sort of closed door AMA sessions and I'm like, dang, that's a good question. It's normally Brent Ellis from Forrester from me.
Oh my God, he's so good.
You know, he's normally like, Dan, I wish I'd asked that question.
Just to tie a bow on that, in
Yeah,
everything we just talked about, analysts are going to be not harsh, but they're going to be investigative, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Companies should open up to their AR teams because, as a communications professional, as most AR teams are, it's their job to prep interactions to external facing audiences. But if your organization isn't naturally transparent, I would say this is where asking questions becomes so important for an analyst relations pro. You have to try to make those relationships, get the answers to those questions so you can prep your stakeholders for
100%.
that external
And
engagement
I
that might
love
have
that,
a tricky question.
Nathan. And the question I would ask is, what is the question you most fear being asked from this interaction?
Right.
And because that person is already knows that question, and they're like, they might be like, "Do you think they're going to ask that?" Probably going to ask it. But I love that. It's super smart.
So, Crystal, keep us on time because we
I'm
could go
sorry.
for hours here.
And see, I told you that Beth is fantastic and she's so humble, but like we could talk to you every week and make that just a series, okay? Of mass. I
We'll
love
have
when
you
we get
back
a
on the
mass.
show in a few months' time, Beth. We'll
New
promise
new
we'll do that.
voices. Bring in all new voices because we have
We're-
such a wonderful community. There's so
For
many
sure.
smart people here. Like
So Beth,
I'm always impressed. Every time I've picked up the phone and said, "Dang, I'm in a pinch. Can you help me?" Open, honest conversation. Like
100%.
this is a fast moving world and we all need to help each other out because it is really hard.
so where's the race car going, my friend? As we close up with the closing predictions or aspiration, where do you want to see us go in the
I want us to drive value. I think like being strategic, using frameworks that are established frameworks. Know your frameworks. Like do a SWOT, do a gap analysis. Like don't be afraid to dig in. AI can really help with like the starting points, and then you add your expertise in. Like don't use that as the end all be all, please, but use it as a data point, as a starting point. Be strategic and like look at things holistically the way an analyst would.
Beth, I've got one last request for you that we can do offline and we can put in the
Okay.
show notes because you have so many good recommendations.
Okay.
For AR pros who want to up level and learn, please send us all of your suggestions, whether it be books to read,
Okay.
people to talk to. If I don't know how to do a gap analysis or a SWOT analysis, where
Okay.
should I go to learn? Please give us your recommendations.
You
This
got
is
it.
a
Yeah.
fantastic episode. I've learned a
You
lot
guys
and
are
I'm really excited
awesome.
about this.
Me too.
You guys are awesome. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for including me. I loved it. I had fun. Great questions. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, with that being said, thank you for your time. We've gone over this time, so you've been so generous with your brilliance, your friendship, and thank you again. Episode 6 with Beth Torrie, the one, the only. Like, subscribe. Let's have a conversation in the comments. See you guys later. Sorry.